Welcome to Living With, our series with the Hypersomnia Foundation. My name is Claire Wylds-Wright, and today I get to have some time with Luke Atkins Barnett, who is a student with idiopathic hypersomnia from Dallas, Texas. Luke has had a severe GABA-related hypersomnia case for over 8 years, dating back to 2016, when he was just 19 years old, stripping Luke of nearly everything in his life and sidelining him for almost a decade. Now studying government at Harvard after an extended medical leave, he is passionate about the arts, film, politics, people, soccer, astrophysics, learning, activism, and life itself. I hope you enjoy this conversation. Welcome, Luke Atkins. It's so delightful to have this conversation with you. I know we've connected before, and I think you've got such an interesting journey and story as a person living with IH. So thank you for sharing it with us on our Living With series.
Thank you. I'm so excited to be here.
Yeah,
I followed
thanks. So,
Hypersomnia Foundation for years, and this is just
okay.
like the ultimate privilege.
Oh, thank you. That's wonderful. So let's just jump straight in. Why don't you tell us a bit about yourself, where you live, what you do, and then we'll go into a kind of deeper dive about your IH.
Awesome. Thank you. All right. Hi, everyone. Yeah, I'm Luke. Luke Atkins Barnett, whatever you want to call me, just Luke. I'm from Dallas. I'm from like the Highland Park area of Dallas, Texas, and I live in Boston now, like more specifically Cambridge. And yeah, I go to Harvard. I study government and history. And yeah, I'm super passionate about the arts and politics and life and learning and people and just all sorts of things. But yeah, I've had hypersomnia for about 8.5 years now, since September of 2016.
When did you first notice signs of, I mean, obviously now you've got a diagnosis of it with IH, but when did you first notice that something wasn't quite right with your sleep?
Yeah, thank you for asking. So yeah, before I get into that, one thing I'll say is like to the Emory crowd watching and some of those other people, with the Sigurdsson Jacobson and Anna Sumner type cases. Mine was like that where um, when you asked me like what specific time period I would pin it
Mm-hmm.
down to, um, it depends on when the symptoms that were very obvious first onset versus when they were onset like full blown. So I
Yeah.
would say full blown, my symptoms had like fully manifested by January of 2017, and that was when they like fully took over my life. But September of 2016 was like when they first started becoming blatantly obvious. And so yeah, I just finished freshman year of college. I was at Baylor University. I was on the soccer team. I was in Kappa Sig. I was, the head social media chair, and
Mm-hmm.
I had a prominent blog. And yeah, I was just super involved in a lot of things. I was a straight A student, and yeah, just all sorts of stuff. And I went, in that September of 2016 period, which was like the start of my sophomore year until January of 2017. So that was like halfway through my sophomore year. I went from, you know, um, all those things, excelling like in class and all of that to not being able to show up to a single class, for 3 months at a time. And, I have, I've had like issues with like depression, like in high school and stuff like that. But
Mm-hmm.
I knew right away that this was different. Like, it just, it didn't feel like, when you're sleepy, it's like a different tired, right? Than like if you're put under anesthesia for like, surgery or getting your wisdom teeth removed. It's like a very like physical type sensation, right? And
Mm-hmm.
so, yeah, when I was 19 years old, about to turn 20 in that like September of 2016 period, yeah, there was a specific day. I forgot which day, but it was like around September 21st or something like that. Where yeah, it just I don't know how to explain it, but it felt like somebody had had spiked my water bottle with like Xanax, or Valium or one of those things, right? Where I was there's a place called Fuego in Waco, Texas, and they have it's open 24/7, and I would get chips and queso there, and so I got queso, and I was driving back from Fuego, and I started blacking out like while I was driving, and my vision was like fading to black, and it felt like a panic attack combined with, I don't know if you've seen the movie Get Out, but this whole like sunken space type phenomenon that Jordan Peele kind of elucidates in that movie. It kind of felt like that was culminating. So it was like a panic attack on steroids, I guess, right? But yeah, I assumed, it might just be anxiety, right? It might be something like that, like the mind is a complex thing, same with the body, right? But it was extremely debilitating. I was saying I like was blacking out while I was driving. So basically I like barely made it back to my house that I was living at that sophomore year. My car was parked like 4 feet away from the curb, and I like stumbled into the house and then passed out and woke up like the next day, like 21 hours later or something like that. Um, and I felt the same, right? So one of the very first things I noticed was when I woke up, I didn't feel any more refreshed. So no matter how much I slept,
Right.
I was still profoundly exhausted. And in fact, the more I slept, the sleepier I was getting. It was like sleep was trapping me in this thing. So
Yeah.
whether I was awake or asleep, it was like this same type experience where sleep didn't feel like the issue. It felt like a byproduct of the fact that my body was like in a coma.
So
So
crazy.
days passed, and then weeks, and then months, and then eventually years. And so, yeah, that's kind of like a brief synopsis.
Thank you, Luke, for sharing that. During that time when you're sort of, this excessive, extraordinary sleepiness, and obviously kind of dangerous, obviously driving, which is sometimes the thing that people really, it's like the big wake up call, that falling asleep at the wheel or what have you. Did you seek out any medical advice during that time?
Yeah, so that's like another like delicate thing with my situation that's like kind of unique. I have like a complex like family history or whatever, right? And in that September of 2016 period, like I was going through a lot, like going into when I started experiencing it, right? And like my mom loves me, and I was in Waco, she was a few hours away, and so it's hard to like when you like find out that your child is suffering, you like want to help, right? But the issue just became like that immediately it was like a mental health thing. Um,
Mm.
and it was like like mental like I've had a psychiatrist like since 2013, since I was like a sophomore in high school, right? Like we figured out like the perfect regimen for the mental health side of things, right? But when there's a positive allosteric modulator in my cerebrospinal fluid that's acting on my GABA receptors in the same way that benzodiazepines do, or barbiturates, which are used to like medically induce comas. What can like the pharma aspect of mental health do about that? Not much, right? It's like if somebody has an ambient nightmare, right? Like the and because I'm sure you've heard horror stories, right, of people having ambient nightmares, and then they do all these crazy things. They're sweet people, and what do? You don't put them on more Ambien. You don't just tell them to get a therapist or whatever. It's like reversing the Ambien or getting the Ambien off of or out of their system was like the most effective thing, right?
Yeah.
So yeah, all that being said, I'm wrapping this up. Yeah, that was like the big thing with the medical stuff is this is an extremely like rare like subset, of an already extremely rare condition, right? And it can often look like the opposite, and rightly so, to train doctors. And so
Yeah.
I'd been seeking out like medical stuff from the beginning.
So would you say then that like your journey towards a diagnosis was much more complex because there was this undertone of some mental health issues anyway, and then complex family situation. How did you actually get a diagnosis of IH then, Luke? How it
Thank you.
seems impossible. I'm tracking with you, but it feels like it's like, how did you do that?
Yeah, it was crazy. And January 2017, like that was when it was clear, right, that like this was like a physiological thing, where
Mm.
I couldn't write a single sentence of a single paragraph of single paper for a single class, for months at a time. It was like I was sitting at like a bench press, and I was trying to, let's say your maximum that you can bench press is 80 pounds, but it's 90 pounds. So no matter how
Yes.
many times you like try, you're like just short, right? For years, it was just like I would sleep 20 hours a day, and I come from like a privileged thing. So for a while, like, I could just like sleep at my mom's. And so I was in a powerless situation, with figuring out what was going on, like you were saying. But, you know, uh, I was with someone like in a relationship, for 4 years. And they, yeah, I wouldn't be here without that person. Today's their birthday, so big shout out to them. Um, but yeah, I would say that that person, also has like rare medical stuff, and so do I. And when that person was seeing me sleep 20 hours a day,
Mm.
um, you know, and saw that I would sleep, from 8 p.m. to 3 p.m., like at my mom's house, and not open my Christmas presents until May. And she would just say
Mm.
mental health, mental health, mental health, mental health, mental health,
Mm.
mental health. Um, then that person kind of realized, that, um, if they step up, that would be like a way to get out of it. And so they helped coordinate a sleep neurologist,
Okay.
in the start of like a medical team. Because I had done all that stuff for years, but it was like my mom would take me to a psychiatrist, and then, um, the psychiatrist, it would be like, okay, let's change all these meds, and nothing changes, right? And then I go months without any meds at
Mm.
all, nothing changes. Um, and then the psychiatrist would give up, and then my mom would take me to a new psychiatrist, and I'd say, take me to a sleep neurologist, take me to a sleep
Start again.
neurologist.
Yeah.
Yeah. So
Yeah.
outside intervention, all that being said.
Yeah. Yeah. I think you're really speaking to, having people around us that can advocate for us, because when you're in it, it's almost impossible. And especially with, that blurry landscape of mental illness. And we hear this so many times that people with IH are written off, people with sleep disorders are just written off, or there's this assumed understanding that, it's not a real disorder in terms of a sleep disorder, it's something else. But I mean, looking at face value, because that's a really powerful testimony, and I think it's really helpful for people to hear how complex it is and how difficult, even if you come from privilege, by your own admission, you've said you in many ways have quite a fortunate position back then. But looking at you from the outside, you're at Baylor, that's quite prestigious, isn't it? How did you go from there to Harvard now with a full-blown sleep disorder?
That is an excellent question. So I went from Baylor to Boston University to Harvard, and I would say that this like shapes all of that. Of I mentioned, September of 2016, I was unhappy, and then suddenly I was sedated 24/7. So then that made me like even more unhappy, right? And
Do you mean medically
even
sedated? Were you given medication to?
like my type of like GABA-related idiopathic hypersomnia, right,
Right.
where there's like
Got it.
this mysterious
Okay.
like somnogen type thing, right?
Yeah.
Um, where that just compounds, it kind of compounds everything, right? When you can't do anything, when you can't play video
Mm-hmm.
games, you
Mm-hmm.
can't text friends, you can't you can't shave, like you can't do all these things. Then obviously you're gonna want to like make like changes to like your scenery and like environment and like that type of thing. Yeah, all this IH stuff, kind of expedited the urgency to like to make changes in my life, right? To control the
Hmm.
things you can control. So I made it to BU, and I loved Boston. I loved, like the more academic setting, right? But I still had the same issue, right? Like I still
Mm.
had IH, and so I changed the scenery, and I was like,
Mm.
oh, like hopefully I won't be in a coma anymore. But I still was, and so then there were like bad memories there as well, and then I took like several years off from school. So like from December of 2017 until like mid 2019, for example, I just slept like all day every day. So yeah, that was just like my life, for several years. And yeah, that was like how I made it from Baylor to BU. And then
Okay.
BU, it was pretty much, that first semester. So that like fall of 2017 was like my full semester like on campus. But after that, it was like, okay, I can't keep trying to like grind through this, right? Like I can't, get all these extensions, they're like months, extensions, and every aspect of my life, like being a mess. I can't fight through all these things, right? Like I have to do something about it, you
Mm.
know? And yeah, eventually I ended up at Harvard. I'm just like in a like unique program where there's a lot of like flexibility, and yeah, it was just like something that worked for me. And I loved Boston, and I always felt like I could, fit in like an Ivy League type setting, but obviously not in like a full time capacity.
Can you identify any seasons where treatment has been really helpful for you? Or because I mean, you've had this protracted academic career, understandably, and but you still used it, didn't you, to like get to the next place, which is remarkable. What do you find helpful, Luke, in terms of managing your symptoms so that you can function as well as you do?
I would say like what I'd have to say about my situation versus like general advice
Hmm.
is, for me it's like a logistical thing, right? Where I have this GABA type, IH, right? Where GABA is something that like if you talk about your, was it your ventolateral preoptic area, with circadian rhythms and everything, um when your body needs to rest,
Hmm.
then it creates or it secretes, GABA, which like is the off switch, and like calms things down and makes you like relax. Or if you go through something like traumatic or whatever, then GABA is like something that like normalizes things by like relaxing you, right? But with me, let's say you have a situation where you're homeless, and you have like an extremely expensive medical thing to like address, and then you like don't have the means to like eat, and then you have to like exercise because you're super stressed, from all those things. Then it's all these things compounding, and so that's something that that kind of dictates, like whether treatment is like good or not, for me.
Right.
Where I had like everything was under control in August of 2023, so like almost 2 years ago, when I started on flumazenil. But when you're homeless and you have to do all these things, with me it's just like a, and it's been this way for years, where we already figured out my stuff like several years ago, but I have to do all these things all at once, even just me being at Harvard right now, um, that just kind of like dominates like everything. So it's just like a money thing and like a logistical
Hmm.
thing. But
Yeah.
for just general advice, like for people, I would say exercise, is super helpful. There's a lot of like physiological things I do that help. I would say like cold water, hot water. Just like how like the U.S. Navy, and like Marines and so on, they use like cold water to like shock the body and like reset it, right? So like resetting the body is like something, that's like key for me and like kind of,
Like cold plunging or something like that. Is that what you mean?
yeah, cold plunging, or like hot shower, like cold shower, right where it's like resetting the nervous system,
Yeah, yeah.
right? Like and so a combination of like exercise and yeah, those hot water, like cold water things, meditation, um,
Hmm.
you know, diet related things. Um, so there's a lot of stuff, that's like super helpful for that. But when you're in a situation like mine, um, then you just have all this brain fog and it's like impossible to talk like me right
Hmm.
now. And then it's like, okay, I'm going to have a few hours today where I can like actually talk. And then otherwise, I'm going to be in this like rambling, type like situation where, if I didn't have to, reckon with the fact that I have classes and like 4 different part-time jobs, and the fact that I had to deliberately stay up last night so that I could even like be on this call right now.
Hmm.
Because if I had slept, like full, 14 hours or whatever,
Hmm.
I wouldn't even be able to talk in the capacity that I am right now.
Yeah.
Because it's like, like I was saying earlier, the more I sleep, the sleepier I
Hmm.
get,
Yeah,
and
and it
so
sounds like you're less
brain fog.
functional, which is so counterintuitive, isn't it? Because everyone thinks more sleep, more rest. I think what you're saying is almost the opposite to that. So I know when we talked before, Luke, like there are certain really helpful support systems, and you referred to, the role of community, I think, in managing, like whether that's those are your peers right now, but can you speak to that a little bit about how your community has kind of been very sustaining?
Yeah, for sure. It's at a point now, like in ways that it wasn't even a year and a half ago, where people were still in
Okay.
denial of my condition, right? With my friends that are still here, and then like also new friends, um, people just recognizing that it's a complex thing and
Hmm.
just being supportive. And they'll send me cat memes on Instagram, or they'll like, I had a friend who like, she just poked me on Facebook or whatever. And so it'll be a lot of like small things like that where it's like, I'm thinking of you, like I love you, I appreciate you. For people with idiopathic hypersomnia, um, it's like not always helpful just to be like asking them questions because they might not necessarily want to like explain their situation all the time. It's like sometimes we just want to live our lives, you
Right.
know? And so,
Right.
yeah, like I would say that it was tough for like a certain number of years, and now community has been like super helpful and something that like keeps me going.
I think there's some really unique aspects to your journey, and but there's also some very relatable touch points, which I think might be it's probably worth asking, if you were to advise someone who, might have or think they might have a sleep disorder like IH, but they've also got already a diagnosis of something like depressive disorder or mood disorder. What advice would you give those people that are in that space? Because it's something that comes up a lot and is very complicated. It's a real challenge for people. What advice would you give for those?
With the medical side, like doing your research and being persistent, with like your doctors, because a big issue for me was like doctors not listening. Find people that will listen,
Hmm.
whether it's friends, family, people that will that will listen and be receptive, especially if you
Hmm.
have like certain idiosyncratic like small little details that will really help, like whether it's your medical team or others in your life, make certain breakthroughs. And so there were small little things, like with my sleep neurologist, small little details I shared that because he listened and took like extensive notes, I think helped
Hmm.
him understand, that it was like a GABA related
Hmm.
issue. And so I would say, yeah, find people that are that will listen and just be just really think about your symptoms and how to express them, and also take
Mm-hmm.
feedback. And so my old partner, would tell me, oh, like your eyes, you go into rapid eye movement like within seconds. And then that
Mm-hmm.
helped like
Mm.
shed light on like certain aspects, right?
Yeah,
And then,
yeah, yeah.
yeah.
It's interesting. So you've taught us, I think, yeah, probably as one of my last questions, it would be, you've talked a lot about brain fog, and I could see how challenging that is for so many people, and it's not a particularly well recognized kind of aspect of living with a sleep disorder. But how has that impacted your ability to study and be successful at Harvard?
Yeah, it's really interesting because I would say the brain fog, like, if you ask me about sports, or you ask me about, you know, um, like the 1517 defenestrations of Prague, or, Eisenhower's farewell speech, like all of these things, I can talk
Mm-hmm.
about like with ease. But then when it's like things, like pretty much all of the contents of this interview,
Mm-hmm.
because it's like about stressful things, and like often traumatic things, like that are necessary to talk about, right? Then that kind of activates that GABA feedback loop. And so what I would say with brain fog and all of that is that, yeah, like right now it's very obvious, like how profoundly much I'm struggling to talk about any of this,
Mm-hmm.
but just a few hours ago, I was also chatting with a friend about, like the upcoming Super Bowl. And I don't even really like watch like football anymore. But that being said, I was able to talk with ease about, oh, is Patrick Mahomes going to get 385 yards and 3
Mm-hmm.
touchdowns? What's he going to do? And so that stuff is easy to talk about with me, where, yeah, the brain fog makes language super difficult, like when the IH isn't treated. It's like
Mm-hmm.
I'm a writer and I also like speak Spanish and so on. But with all the brain fog, then I like can't talk. But yeah, I would say that's a big thing, is like I knew that having this conversation like would just be super difficult. Um, but yeah, like with just random like material, like I study government, it's a lot
Mm-hmm.
easier, especially if it's like memory stuff, So if you're talking about
Mm-hmm.
things you already learned. So I
Yeah,
guess memory versus cognitive
yeah.
thinking.
Well,
It's a
short-term and
different.
long-term memory. Yeah, I mean, I admire anyone who can retain all sorts of dates, things like that. I've got the opposite problem, but um, yeah. And thank you, Luke, because I think it's very brave of you and making yourself vulnerable, and your situation is not straightforward, but I think probably will resonate with a lot of people that probably may not be at Harvard, but so many touch points there about the complexity to get a diagnosis and have support, like vital support from family and community, and what a role, that significant role that plays in our journey. So I'm really grateful to you for like taking the time and using your energy for today. I hope it's not too negatively impacting on the next 24 hours, but thank you so much.
Thank you.